Hi, everyone. My name is Denny S Bryce, and welcome to Debut Spotlight. I am the author of Wild Women in the Blues, as well as an upcoming book called In the Face of the Sun. But today is all about Fiona Collins and her
Flora Collins.
Flora. Why did I say Fiona?
I get
Okay,
it all the time, don't worry.
Flora Collins and her debut novel, Nanny Dearest, which has been out for a few weeks. So we have some exciting things to talk about, the book itself, and also what she's been up to as a debut author in the last few weeks. And we have some other fun things to talk about as well. So let's get started. Flora, tell us about your book. Show that cover again, if you don't
Here it
mind.
is. Has the wonderful red-haired woman. I could do like a
Oh,
book.
and I love when you do that. I saw that on Instagram where people were just putting their eyes above
Well,
the book. It's such a great
exactly. And I
thing.
think it's a trend in cover design, honestly, to have like no eyes right now. So
Yeah, oh, I loved it. I when I saw it, you just reminded me. Sorry to interrupt. Please, let's hear about your book.
So my book is psychological suspense. It's called Nanny Dearest, and it is about a young woman who makes the fatal mistake of reuniting with her childhood babysitter. And it's told in dual narratives from the babysitter's point of view back in the 90s when she was caring for this now young woman, and then present day from the young woman's point of view.
Okay. It's called domestic psychological thriller. How did you come to this kind of complex story that has all that suspense going on, but at the same time with that thriller component and story? Those are hard to to write to me because you have so many things you want to keep moving along. So tell me about your process a little bit.
Well, I've always loved psychological suspense and thrillers and just scary stories in general since I basically learned how to read. Like, it's always been my genre of choice since I was a kid. And so I really wanted to write a book that was kind of quietly creepy, that sort of snuck up on you. And
Mm.
to do so, you have to kind of, I mean, you don't have to, but it's easier to write in a domestic genre, like about for example, a nanny and her charge. So that was sort of the influence going in, was like, what is a kind of quiet, creepy, first of all, relationship and context in which to write a book. And Nanny Dearest was born out of that.
Tell me about the decision to do a timeline where you have each character telling, you know, with their stories in these different timelines, but putting Anne, I believe, in the 1990s timeline, and Sue, she's in the current timeline POV, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So, I have a bad answer to this question. I just got bored. I was writing from Sue, who is the young woman in the story. I was writing from her perspective, I think for a few chapters, like right when I began working on this book, which was in 2019. And
Mm.
I was just like, I'm getting bored. I want to throw in another perspective. And so I started writing from Annie's point of view back in the 90s, just to like shake things up for myself. And
Mhm.
I don't know,
Mhm.
it worked. I had a lot of fun writing Annie's POV. I had a lot more fun, honestly, writing her point of view than I did Sue's, because I think that I don't know, they're both pretty unstable characters, but I think that, Annie really allowed me to let out all this kind of like fun creativity and fear and scare tactics to the readers.
Well, I actually don't find that to be a bad answer because it's part of the reason I have 2 timelines in
Thank
one.
you for saying that.
It's like, what? Ooh, how can I, spice this up? But also, I think that a actual excellent structural tool in a dual timeline is to sustain suspense, tension, mystery by juxtaposing those 2 time frames. What was the most without giving away any story, what's find the most difficult moment to either get to in the story, or once you got
Ooh.
there to
Well, oh,
to
yeah, sorry, go ahead. You
yeah,
finish.
no, just go ahead. I don't it's a tough question to ask and or answer because of the you have a mystery and you have secrets that must be kept for the reader to keep going through. But still, just from a writerly standpoint, what was that moment that
Ooh,
was a
yeah.
tough one?
I mean, so the book is pretty slow burn, intentionally. It's not action packed. It kind of gets going, I'd say, halfway through. So I think once I got about halfway part where the tension sort of ratchets up, that was sort of like the hardest to orchestrate. Like how do
Yeah.
I get readers engaged, or engaged enough to that point that they, want to sort of turn the pages toward the end and see what happens.
And it's sort of like a slow burn in a romance where the tension is really the characters.
Mhm,
That's the
exactly.
of
It's
of
mhm,
what keeps the
mhm.
story moving, and that's what you were able to accomplish with these two
I hope
women,
so.
with these two women, and what who they were. There was a quote recently, and I hope I get it right, from author Stephanie Dray about I don't write about what someone did, I write about who they are.
Mhm.
And I found that, in any type of storytelling, that's the best approach. Now, to stop me from talking, debut author, what has been going on in the world of debut authors in 2022? Because you're in the early part. I think you came out in 2021 still?
Yeah, I came out
Yeah,
November 30th, 2021.
right.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I mean, I'm based in New York, and
Okay.
I was very, very fortunate in that my debut came out on November 30th. I was able to have 2 in-person events in New York and then an in-person event in LA as well,
Yeah.
and it was right before, Omicron sort of hit the city, so
Yeah.
fortunately, it was like I had the perfect window where I could have, like, a vaccinated party and no one was afraid of catching COVID, but, I mean, I also did a lot of virtual events
Yeah.
as well, and, I mean, hello, hi, I'm still doing
Right, still
virtual
doing virtual.
still doing virtual events. But yeah, it's been cool. I think it's a really weird time to be debuting, but I think
Yeah.
because of that, it's been really fun to network like on Instagram and other social media platforms with
Mhm.
other debut authors who are, publishing their book in this really wild world.
Yes, the last 2 years, of course, I
Yeah,
was debut
you
author in
too.
2021, but being a part of a network, and I'll ask you about how that has, contributed to your, debut. Being a part of a network, I found to be so useful in
Mhm.
surprising ways. Support, obviously, but also just getting tidbits from different perspectives. So how has your experience been? I mentioned we were chatting before we went live about you being a part of the debutante ball, which was a group I was in 2021, and you also have the 2021-22 debut groups that are Facebook groups
Mhm.
like that. So tell me about that aspect of what's happening with what's happening with the debut.
It's been amazing. I mean, I love the debutante ball group, for support, as you yourself said, but also just like questions. Like I feel like I am so in the dark about so many things regarding publishing in general, and a lot of the women who are also in this debut group that I'm part of, the debutante ball, which Denny is an alum of, they're much more knowledgeable about all of this. So, for example, we had like a Zoom catch up on Monday, and one of my fellow debuts like pulled up her screen and was like, going through how to, parse out sales and like how to analyze this and that. And I was like, I did not know any of this. Like I feel like I'm taking a free class.
Right? There were
Publishing.
several people of that ilk in our group who were just amazing. So yes, please go on.
Yeah, no, I mean it's been really cool, and I mean, trying to think if there's any other good anecdotes aside from like the education and the support aspect of it. I mean, it's a really again strange experience to be going through, one during COVID, and just like two in general. It's
Yeah.
debuting authors is so wild because you're stepping into this world that, at least for me, like I knew very, very little about. I mean, I always was a storyteller and I always knew I wanted to write and publish a book, but I hadn't worked in publishing prior, had extensive work experience in publishing. I was, only had my agent really to turn to ask questions, and he's obviously a great resource, but he's been
Sure.
in the industry for, 15 years at this point. So it's like there are certain things that only other debut authors are going to get about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was definitely a part of my experience. Although I had been around the publishing industry
Mm,
in different, you know,
different mediums and all that. Yeah.
agencies, there's a lot of things I was doing in publishing that did not have to do with debuting a book, but nonetheless had that experience. But still, those groups were so very,
So
very
helpful.
useful and so helpful. Another thing that we talked about, and I do want to touch upon, is the title of your book. And let's share some of our um, going live conversation, because it reminded me of a famous, in my mind and yours, a movie called Mommy Dearest. And so tell me about why that title resonated for you and was the one to go for.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, Mommy Dearest was a memoir written by Joan Crawford's daughter that was
Mhm.
later made into this movie with Faye Dunaway. I
Yeah, I think it
think.
was Faye Dunaway. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think she won an Oscar for it too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a really fun, campy, classic movie, and it's about this, like, really toxic relationship between, Joan Crawford and her daughter, and so when I got my book deal with Nanny Dearest, it was actually called something else, and
Okay.
the publisher was like, "No, let's spruce it up a little bit," and offer Nanny Dearest as an option. And after some back and forth, I was like, cool, I'm into it. It's derivative, but it has like a great derivation. So not much
Yeah,
to complain
absolutely. Yeah,
about.
and well, that's part of what's happening these days, and what I'm enjoying in publishing is the connection between, or at least at the house I'm at right now, we have conversations about titles that aren't only about, it's about why the title needs to be a certain way, because we
Mm,
want to get as much bang for the buck, if you will, because
right.
there's so much going on in the marketplace, so much going on working with indie bookstores versus retailers versus this. So what has surprised you? I'm going to say the most, and you can say more than one thing, about the last few months with your book release. What thing just made you go, "Whoa," and good or bad,
So,
or
oh my gosh, so much. I'd say on the let's start with like the negative maybe, is that I was so burnt out and so exhausted after, the few weeks, post launch. Like I mean, which I knew was going to happen, but I don't think I knew the extent to which I would feel this like kind of like visceral, just like depletion. I was also working on my second book, which was due in December, but I pushed it to January because I was like, I cannot get this done in time. So I was just, so I don't think I fully realized how much like sitting down and doing as like blessed and grateful I am
yeah,
and was for the press, like, doing interviews and doing articles that had to do with my,
yeah,
basically like absorbing myself with this narrative in this book that I hadn't even really revisited in like a year because I wrote the book in 2019 and 2020. So you know, I was kind of going back to my process from 2 years ago and having to revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
And remember like how I did this and why I did this. So that was the I would say the negative or the most surprising negative. But
Okay.
and then on the positive end, just like the reception, especially from like friends of mine who don't really read in this genre, has been incredible. It's like so cool to see how people interpret it differently, interpret the ending differently, like what they note, the little details they notice, you know, in my descriptions, for example, little Easter eggs as well. Like,
Mhm.
you know, you kind of don't expect, I mean, uh, obviously you want like your friends and family to read the book, but it's like I always told my friends, I was like, you don't have to read it, just buy it, just buy it. I just want my sales number to be high, like
Right.
just buy it. But people are actually reading it, and it's
Mhm.
really cool to see, you know, how they react to it. Because I don't think it's a book that's for everyone. I think it's kind of like a, you know, it's an acquired taste. You have to like kind of creepier stories. You have to like slow burn psychological suspense. Like there's a lot of kind of like grittier parts of it. So I don't know.
Mhm.
It's been really cool to see that kind of reception.
Well, you dropped a phrase that now I want to go back to. What it was the Easter egg that you put in the book?
I just like little things about my life that you would only really ever know about, and like unless you like knew me well. Like I had
Oh, okay.
yeah, like fun
Or
little things.
personal Easter egg.
Yeah, little yeah,
Oh,
like some good ones were that friends of, and family noticed. Like I put in the nightclub that my parents would go to in the
oh, how
80s.
cool.
And
Oh,
so
that's fun.
so when they read it, my family read it, they were like, and it's not part of the book, but like there's one throwaway line of where Sue, the young woman, her parents are, I think, are discussing, or someone is discussing, you know, back in the 80s, we did X, Y, and Z
Mhm.
out on the town in New York. And so I snuck in the, you know, the my parents' favorite nightclub at the time. Another good one was a funny anecdote that happened to one of my childhood best friends when we were in like first grade. I
Yeah.
slipped in there, just kind of fun stuff like that.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about Easter eggs and my book because I never really thought Easter egg, but some of my relatives called or text, we don't talk, text, and my main character, one of my main characters in the next book is her first name is Daisy, and that was my mother's name.
Oh,
They're assuming
cool.
I'm writing about my mother, and I'm not really because Lord knows. But there are those moments, and I just really like the idea of calling Easter eggs that are typically about the next book or some, how they use on
Yeah,
TV
yeah.
shows on and things like that. In terms of things that are just directed towards family and friends. That's fun. That's really I like that. So maybe borrowing that for future use or
Yes,
something.
please do. Please
Oh,
do.
it's so good. Again, let's go back to Nanny Dearest, but also I'm real curious about your next book.
Mm.
But tell me a little bit more about locations and how they worked into your story because that's always in a suspense, just contrasting
Very
those
important.
things.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about that, and then I'm going to ask you about your next book before we run out of time.
Yeah, no. So it's set mostly in New York, which was just, I mean, it's an easy decision on my part. I am a New Yorker, born and raised. I was born and raised in Manhattan, and now I live in Brooklyn.
Mm,
And I've spent a lot of time in Queens in my early 20s too. So, you know, I have.
I used to live in New York, so yeah,
Where do you where in New York were you?
I lived in every borough.
There you
I
go.
Yeah, I was in Jamaica, Queens. I was in Park Slope in Brooklyn. I was in Manhattan.
You're
Just
everywhere,
everywhere.
like in this book. No, so that was easy on my part. And then the 90s chapters are set in a fictional upstate town, which is I mean, back to Easter eggs, the upstate town is named for after my middle name, Isham.
Okay.
I don't know. So I think
Excellent.
I just can't think of like, names or words to use, and I just use them as placeholders, and they just end up being the name.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that was just kind of a little bit inspired by, I went to college at Vassar, which is in the Hudson Valley, and the
Mhm.
town is supposed to be further north than the Hudson Valley, but same kind of feel, like colder and more isolated, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of lakes in that region. I don't know. I made it very. I had not left New York State much in my life, so I just like, it'd be easier
Went with
to
right.
this in New
What you
New
knew.
York.
But that also contributed to the environment and atmosphere of the story as well.
Yes,
So the locations for that kind of storytelling, or any kind of storytelling really, are so important. Um,
I
but as I said, time is moving on us. Please tell me about your next book.
Mhm. So it hasn't I haven't officially announced it on Instagram yet, but it's on Goodreads, so I think I can just tell you guys the title. It's called A Small Affair,
Mhm.
and it is a much kind of louder, more action-packed thriller than Nanny Dearest is. It's at current I'm still in edits in it, so edits for it. So things may change, but for now it's there are three different points of view, five different timelines. It's a lot. It's a crazy kind of like loud concept story. But I'm excited for it. I got the cover and it's amazing. So I don't know. Get people
Yeah,
excited
isn't
to
it fun
read it.
having those books keep coming? Yeah,
I
I'm
am
already in discussions about my next cover for Kensington, and I'm like, "Oh, yay, here they come."
here they come. Here they
But
come.
but it's all it's just I must admit, it's always challenging. Um, Publishing has a lot of different avenues that are intriguing or what have you,
Mm.
but it's so much fun at the same time.
It
Um
is.
and learning the process, and that's what I've enjoyed about being a debut novelist last year, and having the opportunity to talk to debut novelists this year.
Hi.
So you're my first for 2022. Even though your book came out in 2021, it's out there and people should grab it. Can you show us the cover again?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
Nanny
and
Dearest.
any last comments you'd like to make about Nanny Dearest and or what's happening with you, Flora? So
I'd say people, go out and buy it. It's available pretty much wherever books are sold, including airports. And then A Small Affair out probably at the end of this year, if not 2023. And that one is about the perils of online dating. So get excited for that one.
fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, that's
Jenny,
Flora. Yes.
I just said thank you.
Oh, I thought I heard somebody call my name. I'm just like, Twilight Zone. But thank you. No, thank you for being with us today. And everybody out there, don't forget Nanny Dearest, available now. And thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye bye.